I'm Nick Chafin. I was born and raised in Little Rock and currently live in Fayetteville. The work of art that this video will focus on is found at Crystal Bridges Museum in Bentonville and is known as Parkhurst House, Gloucester, Captain's House. It is painted by Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper lived an interesting life which saw a long and winding path towards eventual worldwide success. His parents were supportive of his artistic talents, but encouraged him to pursue illustration because that increased his chances of making a living doing what he loved. He enrolled at the New York School of Art after completing high school in 1900 and learned the intricacies of illustrating and painting. Hopper was greatly influenced by his trips abroad to Europe after he completed art school, but America was always his home. Parkhurst House, Gloucester is an especially interesting painting to evaluate because it marks the beginning of a time period in which Hopper begins to paint in a style that would later become his signature. Hopper lived in New York City, but would often spend his summers in the seaside town of Gloucester, Massachusetts. Hopper immensely enjoyed painting the structure of this town, which varied from elaborate mansions to little shacks that housed the town's poor. Traditionally, his paintings up until this time were created using oil paints, but his paintings of Gloucester often were created using watercolor. He enjoyed being able to paint structures outside as he looked at them, and watercolors gave him the freedom to paint beautiful works as he saw them. This particular work by Hopper uses watercolor paints and graphite. The scene depicts the front side of a large white house that is surrounded by a low white fence filled with holes, from which green grass can be seen on the other side. Various other houses can also be seen in the background, along with a flagpole. The use of graphite and watercolor gives this painting an appealing aspect of roughness. Lines are not completely straight, and in some places the watercolor bleeds over into an adjacent color. There are a large number of square rectangular shapes found throughout this painting. The roofs of the houses all are square and slanted upward towards peaks. The low fence surrounding the house appears to be made from some sort of stone and is pockmarked with holes, all of which are square or rectangular. These solid shapes give a certain aspect of stillness to the painting. The lack of human figure forced the viewer of the painting to observe structures and their surroundings. Evaluating this painting provides some interesting insights into the way that Hopper painted. We know that this picture was painted at a time of transformation in Hopper's life. He is beginning to sell some of his works and had begun to focus on realism. The general stillness and lack of human figures in this painting can be attributed to an enjoyment of Gloucester. It is an obvious divergence from everyday life in New York, in which life was filled with people in the streets and constant levels of movement. Hopper relished in this retreat from the hustle and bustle of life and emphasized the low-key way of life in these paintings. The windows of all the houses shown are either drawn closed with shades or on the inside of the houses are painted with dark colors and thus no details are clear. Hopper is described as the great American realist, and Parkhurst House, Gloucester is an embodiment of the realism that he is known for. Realism became a prominent style of painting in the 19th century, and Hopper was known as one of the latest painters of the realist style in the United States. Realist artists observed the common man in everyday life of the places in which they worked, and depicted this in realist paintings. Most famous early realists were people like Bellet and Bonheur, both of whom depicted everyday life of peasants in France. The Gleaners and the Horse Fair both emphasize and appreciate the work of peasants in a way that was not found in romanticized art. Hopper is a uniquely American realist. All of his most notable works depict uniquely American scenes, but he can't be described as a regionalist because he paints in scenes that are found across the United States and could be found in numerous different areas. His most famous painting, Nighthawks, depicts a night in the busy city of Chicago. Hopper was less interested in certain aspects of realism and instead preferred to emphasize feelings of isolation and loneliness that he felt was extremely prevalent during his time. He was complimented for his ability to remain objective, but he commonly painted solitary figures with little to no emotion in an attempt to convey the isolation that he felt occurred in society, even in big cities. His works, such as Gas, portray a solitary man working on a gas pump in the middle of an empty stretch of road, which gives an extremely isolated feel, while also making it uniquely American. Parkhurst House, Gloucester portrays a beautiful day that is filled with life and feeling, and yet there are no human figures depicted. Hopper focuses on the constants that can be found within the world, and I find that to be a very appealing outlook on life. When looking at the topic of this video, I often find myself completely zoning out from any surrounding activities and attempting to figure out the stories behind the scene that Hopper has depicted. I imagine myself being alone on an empty street corner, taking in the beauty of the scene, while also being distinctly aware of the lack of human involvement. The painting suggests a level of isolation that forces you into his world. There is a certain level of mystery that I also enjoy. I know that each of the houses has a story behind it and a family that live within, but I'm left to my own devices to interpret these stories, not knowing if I'm correct in my assumption. Hopper combines a truthful portrayal of American life while also intertwining it with a loneliness and mystery that forces the viewer to think deeply about the scene that he is portraying.